Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Double 18 Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Nagishi. Thanks for joining us on this Monday night, wherever you are. As you know, my regular co-host, Ken Fang, is currently out of the country and also on vacation, as you can probably tell. He is in Taiwan, and I do also believe that he is in Japan starting today. So really hoping that my co-host Ken and his family is enjoying their time out in the Asia Pacific. They were already in Taiwan the week before, where Ken and his family are originally from. We are hoping to get him back and then do the live stream first week of August. I do believe Ken is coming back this weekend, so we're going to give him a little bit of time to recover from jet lag and everything. But without Ken, I still have the pleasure and the honor of welcoming this guest tonight. We had him a couple of years ago, back in, I believe, 2021 or 22, with James Deco to talk about the NFL season just before the 2022 season. He is one of the very important voices in the sports media world, from the playing a great important role with the AAJA. We're going to talk about that as well. Asian American Journalist Association. From CBS Sports, it is Tommy Tran. Tommy, good evening, and thanks for joining us again.
Yeah, it's great to be back with you, Stephen. And you're right, it's been a few years. And it's interesting because the last time I was with you, I was on with James Coe, and I saw your
Yes.
tweet that you'd put out that you have James on in a couple of days, which I'm very thankful for because I don't want to follow the great James Coe. I want to serve as the
Yeah.
appetizer because I'm like a leadoff batter. I just want to get on base so that Coe can hit it out of the park or hit it to the gap so I can try to score from first.
Yeah, James is working out in Los Angeles. I think he did a little bit of a sports anchor work with the local affiliate station. I forgot which one, maybe NBC or
I
something
think you're
like that.
right. Yep.
Yeah, NBC LA, legendary station. So, yeah, I'm really excited about having him. I know he's about probably 30, 40 minutes of his own time to talk with us in 2 days from tonight as well. 10 Eastern, 7 Pacific. So make sure to follow him for all the great knowledges. But tonight I'm having you on tonight, and really excited and honored to have you on again. So it's kind of like the conversation that Ken and I had a little bit from our last week's show, or the show that we had 2 weeks before. It's about a little bit of the sports media and the greed and everything that's been taking place this summer, as well as the what's going on. But fresh from the memories of the All-Star game that we witnessed this year, the game ended in a 6-6 tie, and then ended off in a home run derby type situation where 3 batters from each league hit a home run. Whoever hit the most ended up winning in that contest. Tommy, I would like to know from your perspective, did the Major League Baseball did the right thing with how they ended the All-Star game? And I know there were some people were saying that this is going to happen in regular Major League regular season games pretty soon. Do you buy that notion as well?
So I would not be surprised if some type of format, whether it's this iteration that we just saw at Truist Park in Atlanta, ends up being sort of the regular season decider in terms of figuring out games, continuing to shorten games, because as we've already seen in Major League Baseball, they've been trying to do other things to try to make sure once a game gets into extra innings to try to maybe end it as fast as possible. I mean, you and I, Ken, we kind of grew up with some potential 18, 19 inning games that would go uh, long into the night. And this was even before I moved to the East Coast. This is when I was still in California and enjoying some of these late night games. I could only imagine what it was like being in Central Time or East Coast time, bleeding into 1 or 2 a.m. But just to go back to your point about my thoughts on the All-Star game, the way it ended, and Schwarber was fantastic. I think I think they hit a home run with that. I think the format of having too many players. We saw that 1 year, of course, with just expending all of that energy and all of the resources of having the players and start running out of players. And there's already, team allotments. They don't want their guys going any more than they have to. So I think
Right.
that was the best way to actually determine a winner once they were tied going into, potentially extras, deciding to forego that and then just going to the swing off. You get three swings. Whoever gets there gets there. And of course, Kyle Schwarber was the hero. Didn't even need Pete Alonso to come through. Now, the interesting thing was, and I don't know, what's done since then is sort of, I thought it was supposed to be predetermined, but Kyle Stauer on the National League side with Dave Roberts kind of got a little bit surprised because I think they were supposed to predetermine the lineup. And then, those early guys that go like Judge and Otani, they're gone, man. They're not even,
Right.
they're
They went
not
home.
sticking
Yeah.
around. They're already on a plane or on their way back. So, obviously that's for the All-Star game. If they implement that to something for Major League Baseball, they would already have all the guys there. What I did think was interesting is as much as I love what Kyle Schwarber did, and we all know he can hit bombs. He's done that for a long time. I don't think he deserved the All-Star game MVP. I think it's much tougher to hit it in live competition, albeit an exhibition. But that's just me nitpicking. But I loved it. I loved it, and I thought that it was something that was great to decide the exhibition. Now, whether that becomes something that happens in the regular season, I personally wouldn't be opposed to having something similar to that. I get it though. It's a little bit like a penalty shootout in soccer or a hockey shootout at the end to
Right.
determine something. If it was something closer to the hockey version, I think fans would certainly enjoy it. But I haven't heard a lot of pushback. I don't know if you have, so.
No, I think it's I think it was to determine the end of the All-Star game,
Hmm.
which you know it starts late. Unfortunately, usually it starts at 8 o'clock, but then the opening ceremony, there's just kind of like push it back to like 8:20 something Eastern time, and then the game itself. By the time it got to the end of the ninth, right, like the regular 9 innings, I think we saw a little bit of empty stadiums in the Truist Park. Now, as somebody who lived in the Atlanta area, I know traffic in the Atlanta
Mm.
area is hellacious, one of the worst in the country. So, as somebody who lived in, experienced that myself, it's understandable. But to see that many empty stadiums and to not have Otani or Judge be involved in it, I thought it was a little bit, I don't want to take anything away from Kyle Schwarber and the others that participated in it for the first time in the swing off. So I do believe that when it comes to the regular season, though, it's a little bit tricky, obviously, with the baseball being such a traditionalist sports per se. But like you said, if it's like implemented in the way we see in the soccer and with the NHL, let's just say we play, at least 3 innings, and then if there's still zero, like the score remains the same, then we'll just probably have like a swing off and see, if it can be done. Or maybe 1 or 2 innings, and then the 12 inning we could just basically have like a swing off, so that at least you can preserve the arms for to make it at least give a little bit of taste of the extra innings, and then do the a swing off, much like you see it in the soccer and hockey. Do you think that might be something that would work in this day and age?
Yeah, I think it would. Again, it consolidates baseball, which I know they have tried to do for various different reasons and various
Mm-hmm.
different ways, whether it's pitch clock, ghost runner, and extras. They understand that the average baseball fan doesn't have the attention span, again, that the older generation would have. So you have to make it in a sense that, and just imagine too, if you have a game that's competitive, whether that be and we know baseball can be a fantastic low scoring game, it can be equally as good, of course, high scoring, but you get to a point where, to your point, you finish 9 innings, maybe you play one or two with the ghost runner, and if after that you're still in a deadlock, then you go to the swing off. And I think that's very, it's very TikTokable. You can just cut in a short highlight. It can be the end, the cap, a highlight that maybe we would do at CBS Sports. It's like, hey, here's the tying run. This would go to extras, but we go straight to the swing off because that was deciding this particular game between, the Cubs and the Cardinals, and then boom, you show whoever had the last swing to end it. So now there's the machinations of getting it through both sides and agreeing to all that stuff. But I think, things that baseball is trying to do with the ABS that they did at the All-Star game, and again, implementing something like this, I think that's doable. I think that fans wouldn't be opposed to it. I think more and more the traditionalist baseball fan that hangs on to some of these things begins to wane by each year, and the other types of fans that I think baseball is trying to grab would probably gravitate towards this format a little bit better.
I've had this conversation in the past with my co-host Ken Fang from Awful announcing about the All-Star game, and the current format. We know that the NBA is just trying everything they can to try to keep it relevant. The NHL had a great success with the Four Nations stuff this past winter. The MLB had their swing off. The NFL with the Pro Bowl, it's now become more of a glorified dodgeball exhibition per se. Tommy, as you've gotten older and as you work in the industry as it is right now, what is your sentiment overall about these All-Star game and its relevancy in today's world? Do you feel like at some point maybe the All-Star game has kind of lost its luster, but do you think we'll get to a point where we're like, we don't need it anymore? Or do you feel like as somebody who works in the sports media side, it will always be there because you need content to keep the, interest of the fans, even if the ratings certainly doesn't match the product on the field?
So I think for baseball, I think it's crucial for us because of how slow the season is, especially
Yeah.
this sort of 2 week stretch. It's the dog days of summer. The NBA finals are done. Obviously, if you're a golf fan, you have the Open Championship that just concluded. But if you're not a golf fan, then there's really slim pickings of what's happening out there. The W has its All-Star game too. So for me, I still enjoy Major League Baseball's All-Star format. I know the home run derby a lot like the slam dunk contest where it gets kind of old, and thankfully, baseball continues to change the rules and try to make things a little bit more palatable for everyone involved, whether it's the players, whoever's throwing the tosses and stuff. NFL, I don't know if you're ever going to be able to do anything with that just because of the timing. You can't do it in the middle of the season. It's the end of the season. Guys don't want to get hurt. Guys don't want to participate. Guys drop like flies. And so I think perhaps if there was something about Pro Bowl designations, I don't know how you would be able to do that. Making perhaps the notion that you want to keep your Pro Bowl designation, you got to participate, but that's a tricky line, obviously. And then the NBA, it's tough. They've obviously gone through different formats and things of trying to change things up. Will we ever get to a USA versus the world? I know that's been thrown out there obviously a lot, but I think outside of a starting 5 or 7 on the NBA side, I think it's tough on the world side, I should say, it's tough to sort of roster that many good players. And you're always going to leave a lot of American guys that are worthy of being all stars out because of the numbers. So that in itself makes it a little difficult. But just to get back to your point, like I think, you know, I still again have MLB and its All-Star game at my very top. Now the implementation and now the acceptance of interleague has kind of taken a little bit of that away because guys play each other all the time. It used to be when you grew up National League, American League, you don't see each other till the fall classic for the most part, and obviously trades happen if one guy goes from another league to another. But usually that becomes that core NL versus AL was something I used to always look forward to and seeing. Otani go against Judge, and there was no chance you would ever see that in a regular season game for Dodgers and Yankees. But now you get a series that can match up from the scheduling wise. So that's taken it from a little bit, but that adds to Major League Baseball's regular season. All-Star games in general are going to be a little bit tough with everybody having different options now and different things going on. But I still think baseball, even basketball with what they're doing. Hockey, though, to your point with the Four Nations, was highly successful. So over time, perhaps they can challenge NBA. If the NBA can get it right, though, I still think they hold the number 2 slot pretty handily.
Mhm. Do you think baseball at some point will ditch the interleague play like we were discussing about it, or do you feel like interleague is kind of so ingrained in the baseball world now. It's kind of like difficult to, you know, remove it or just scale it back just to make All-Star game relevant, or am I being am I pushing it a little bit
You wouldn't be pushing it. I think we just want our cake and we want to eat it too, right? We want both things. We want the
Yeah,
All-Star game to matter, but like I said, we also still want the regular season to be
means
exciting and
something.
well, all the games mean something, but for instance, right, you know how this year Major League Baseball put together its rivalry weekend, and it was more geographically based, right? So it wasn't traditionally like Dodgers Giants, Red Sox Yankees. It was Yankees Mets, right? Or it was more regional to try to drum up some interest as again, quote unquote rivalry weekend, but it's typically for the most part they were interleague matchups because regionally you would have one NL traditional team and an AL team um, go at it to each other, or something like to the effect of, obviously White Sox, Brewers, or something. It's just something that you would have again, like this for it's for regular season, it's for fans. And though it diminishes the All Star game, this is something I think baseball wants to do. Universal DH too is something now. Even though you split, you go back to traditional schedules, you're probably not going to have pitchers hitting again in the National League like we used to. It just kind of gotten to the whole point where traditionalists got over the fact that we wanted to see Madison Bumgarner or Zach Greinke not bunt and at least try to go for it, and those days are gone now. So I don't think we'll ever go back and it go away from interleague. I think they've embraced it. I think the league feels like they need to do it. Um, I don't know if you get to some type of team captain pickup type style like basketball has tried to do to maybe switch it up, but I think it's still strong enough. As I mentioned, I think MLB still got the goods. It's still strong. You get Skeens and Scooble being your probables. You still want to see some of those matchups. There's some years where the scheduling gods don't line up, and so you want to be able to get Skeens judged if it doesn't fall in the regular season. So. Um, Selfishly, as you and I are talking, I think we would love to have a little bit more of the nostalgia back, but I think that it's still a pretty good product.
Now, following up on the conversation Ken and I had, it was the current state of the sports for being a fan in this country. One of the conversations that we've had was, has sports become too expensive for an average fans in this country? I wanted to show you an interview, which I'm sure you might be a little bit familiar with June Lee, who used to work for ESPN, now on his own. This was his recent interview with CNN on his X timeline that I played. For those who did not see our show a couple of weeks ago, take a listen.
June, I'm worried not only about the financial cost, but also the societal cost. Something you wrote, I'm going to read aloud. The result isn't just inconvenient, it's lonely. As access shatters, rituals vanish, as do the moments that make sports communal. A bar full of strangers cheering for the same team, the generational ties passed down through the seasons. Those experiences fade under a system that dictates that the more you can pay, the more you can see, until the game disappears behind another paywall. Expand on that.
We're living in a time where there's so few things that people can actually talk about at the water cooler with a stranger on the subway. And sports is one of those last things that people can actually come around, because it's something that happens in the real world. It's a current event. And it's not one of those things like a television show where those all used to be on the same broadcast network. And now everyone almost seems to be watching a different TV show. I don't know how many conversations I've had with a friend. Well, they'll bring up a TV show that I've never even heard of. Sports is one of those last things that everyone is still kind of following in the same way. And because of the way that the leagues are trying to maximize the amount of money they're making from sports fans through these subscription services, it's also just cracking the community that we see around these teams. I've had multiple friends come up to me about how they want to go to a sports bar, and they've actually had to log in to their own YouTube TV account or some streaming service because the bar isn't able to actually stream those games. And when people can't take those moments for granted, that you can just go to a sports bar and watch whatever big game might be on TV, those habits, those small habits start to fade over time. And as a result, it's hurting sports bars across the country.
I so applaud you for making that point. Just a quick final thought from me. I can't find stuff when I want to watch something, gone are the, now I'm going to sound like the elder cocker here, but gone are the days when you knew on what channel you'd find the hockey game, the baseball game, the basketball game, or the football game. It's not only do we not watch the same shows, but we can't keep up with all the changes in terms of where we can go to watch more. Thank you. The piece was great. I hope people will Google it and read it, and appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. So from a fan perspective, the streaming services has gotten so spread widely now that I think one of the discussions that I think I've had with last week's guest 2 weeks ago, Kevin Turner from 97.1 The Ticket, the Eagle, who used to work in the sports industry. One of the theories he said was the COVID has forced the leagues to scramble for an extra revenue that they lost. So now that for example, NFL has Black Friday and Christmas games that's usually were on regular televisions being sold out like separate packages. So now the fans have to scramble and subscribe to that streaming service if your team is playing. And then we just heard that the F1 is leaving ESPN, and now you have to subscribe to Apple TV starting next year. There's so many of them right now. Peacock, which used to be a pretty affordable streaming platform, is now has become. I saw that it was probably the most expensive streaming services out there. Tommy, as somebody who work in media and also watch your fair share of sports on and off, what were your thoughts on the interview and the expensiveness for average fans, not just from the streaming service, but also traditionally when you go to a ball game or any events out there, it's gotten so expensive and it's become very, very too expensive for one individual or much less a family of 4 or 5 to go together.
Yeah, there's a few things you brought up there, so I'm going to try to prioritize how I'm going to respond to that. Let me just first start with what you mentioned, like going to a game. I actually, so I have just had a 10-month-old. My wife and I just had our first child, so he's 10 months, and we actually almost took him to a Giants Marlins game down here in South Florida where I am. And
Okay.
and actually it wasn't bad. Because to be fair, it's the Marlins who aren't doing well, and Lone Depot Park happens to be, obviously when there's other division rivals in town, there seems to be more fans in that. And so there were cheaper tickets to be had. I can understand on the flip side, I'm originally from California, Bay
Yep.
Area, grew up a Giants fan, and I know they've gone in some leaner times recently, but like in general, the heyday of those World Series years, it was a hot
Yeah.
ticket to try to get to AT&T and Oracle, and it was, and obviously in the heart of Silicon Valley and in the city, it was an expensive ticket to go, and a lot of times you would have to either strategize what games you would go, what series you would go, or if you had season tickets, you would split them or sell them or whatnot. I understand that part. So less so going recently. I know it can be expensive to go to some sporting events, which is why people opt to go to other sort of maybe more minor league events, or even sort of the Savannah Bananas, things other that you can get your money's worth for families outside of going to major league or pro style teams. That being said, I can tell you conversely, the Panthers have had an amazing run on the ice down here in South Florida, and they have
Right.
created so much revenue for the local sports bars, not just the famed Elbow Room in Fort Lauderdale Beach, but obviously even just the other ancillary suburban bars. A buddy that I work with, his brother runs one of the local bars, and they did so well during the last few years of these Panthers runs, and even just during the regular season, if people can't get to Sunrise, which is a suburb of Broward County and not necessarily in Miami or Fort Lauderdale. It's about a 20 to 45-minute drive, depending on where you're coming from and what you got. All right, so that's sort of the live event part of it, and I can only contribute so much to that. In terms
Mhm.
of the bigger picture of what I think you were trying to show me, and I've seen a little bit of what that interview with June is. I don't know his entire write-up, and I don't know the entire context of what he had. I know there was a big number of how much people are paying. I
Yeah.
get that. But for the most part, you can still find your local teams on sort of this regular channel. What I think gets people, and I think that either that CNN host or in macro things is live sports has changed hands so frequently over the last handful of years. And so then it gets confusing trying to figure out what sport is on what television. For instance,
Yeah.
we for a long time at CBS, we continue to have college football and golf. Golf hasn't really changed for us, and we split that obviously with a couple other networks. And so the schedule for the PGA Tour has been constant on CBS, and I think no one denies that that for the most part, outside of a few events, you're going to be finding Jim Nance and Trevor Immelman on CBS for us almost week to week. What's changed though, for instance, though, is like Turner Sports has gone through a huge overhaul of the sports they had, and now
Right.
the sports they have. They are now getting into the tennis game. They've now gotten
Mhm.
into obviously college football. They've got some trade-offs with ESPN to carry some other things too. So they are now, because of the NBA, and obviously the whole thing with inside the NBA and TNT, which was the stalwart for many a generation, that's
Yes.
changed. So I think more nationally, it's hard to find things because rights change so often. So now, and now Amazon's going to have this package, and NBC's picking up this up, and ABC's got this and that. So it gets confusing for people to figure that out. And then also, which we talked about, and I think you've talked about, just the increase in streaming only events, whether it be Netflix and Christmas, or to your point, the Black Friday that's on Amazon Prime. And sometimes Peacock will have just Peacock exclusive games for NBC and whatnot. Those are becoming more popular, which makes it difficult for places like some sports bars. They have to decide whether they want to stick to their normal cable package, or maybe they've got a digital internet package where they can stream. That then becomes difficult. Although I will say, in a lot of cases for the NFL at least, when there is a Black Friday Netflix situation, the local markets for those teams participating usually can be seen locally. Like that's usually a thing where, like, if it's like Chiefs Raiders, we had, I think, on a Black Friday, or the Netflix games, which obviously are going to be on the streaming stuff. And a lot of times they will be viewed locally. You can watch them if you're in that local market. But again, it's tailored and tied to that market. So again, hard to go to a bar on Black Friday or Christmas and go, I want to watch those games, because that bar may not run Netflix or have access to that. So I get all the frustration. I think there's layers and some context to that. And I would never, ever push back on anything that June does, because he does fantastic work, and I'm certainly happy to see him back in the fold after what he had to go through and sort of stay dormant. But I think at the core, it's clear, right? Like, live sports are getting more expensive to go to. Live rights are getting more expensive to obtain. We are now also sort of in this day and age where regional sports, which used to be a booming business, which used to be an anchor of how you used to view your sports, that has become more expensive. And now we're getting to a point where we're having to have some sports books like FanDuel actually carry regional sports network, because they have the
Yeah.
funding to do it. And it's been really tough to see, because again, I come from the Bay Area. I come from where we used to have NBC Sports Bay Area and California, two budding channels that had, I mean, I'm just saying off the top of my head, from like 2005 to 12 or 20 rather, it was like, five or six championships and dozens of playoff appearances. And yet, the Raiders leave, and then things happen. And then, the rights get so expensive that things start downsizing. And that's certainly seen through other aspects of the regional networks. It's just been tough to see, because then it's almost like it's a little bit of like a parallel to what we have, societally, where it's like there's no more middle class. There's like local markets, there's network, but what happened in between, which used to be sort of the regional networks, which were booming and budding, and they've in a lot of places had to cut down and downsize, and so that's been tough. While it's still at the same time, these rights are still ballooning, so it's just sort of a catch-22, and I think that all of that stuff plays into, I think, what you're talking about with how it's expensive, why it's more expensive, why it's tougher to maintain. I think all of those things are sort of like continuing to just kind of play into this perfect like mashup.
Mhm. One of the things that Ken and I frequently talked about was the summer where we saw the U.S. Gold Cup and then the Club World Cup held simultaneously, butting heads with each other. And, the CONCACAF as well as the FIFA, both went up against each other. The tickets were so expensive. Basically, the stadiums were, not full at all. And then toward as the game time got closer, the tickets were basically sold the tenth of what it was originally charged, et cetera, et cetera. And I've long complained about the commissioners, the chairman, the league presidents, whatever you want to name them. It seems as though the greed has kind of overtaken the sporting world nowadays. Do you kind of feel that the organizations that govern, even the NCAA of the world in this country, even as well, from a global perspective, FIFA, which we know that's been notoriously corrupt for decades. Do you feel like this is kind of like the watershed moment where they're trying to, I don't know, exploit the fans as well, where where the fans will eventually going to have to start pushing back against these leagues and their the executives who run these organizations too?
Yeah, that one's tough. I think, so the Gold Cup's different. Obviously, that's a normal thing that we've had before. It's standard format, and
Exactly right.
and obviously you get a dream scenario where you get U.S. and Mexico in a place like Houston. It's pretty standard,
Right,
and that's
right. It's basically
right.
90% Mexican fans versus
Yes, right, and which is, I think
right.
they totally understand that, and that's no surprise there. I will say with the Club World Cup, to your point, I think that is a thing where, even coming into the tournament here, questions of, you know, players from these clubs being
Right. The
overworked and
players' health were also being exposed in this
correct,
heat as well.
right, and it's not just and it's different, right? Because it's a World Cup style competition that people actually play for. It's not like some of these big clubs in Europe where they do their summer tours, where like maybe
Yes. Mm.
Chelsea, Manchester City, and Atletico Madrid, they'll just spend their summer, that's theirs, and then other clubs like Paris Saint-Germain and Bayern
Yes.
Munich will go to Asia and they'll do their Asian tour and they'll go to India,
Mhm.
China, Australia and whatnot. But those are friendlies. Those are generally preseason. Most of the players don't play. Uh, they had the style of group play and the knockout phases here. Do you remember? So the very early days, Chelsea was playing in Atlanta, like on a Monday against LAFC, I think, or one. They were in the same
Exactly.
group,
Yes. Yes.
and obviously there's these huge empty stadium shots, and there's like 12 people looking like you. Jokes aside about, oh, there's nobody here, nobody cares, and
I think it
whatnot.
was like
Yeah,
in the 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
and it
That did
was
not help as
correct and
well. Right.
correct, and
Because
and you
we
don't
all
have and
were.
yeah, and it didn't involve like and obviously it didn't involve Atlanta, Atlanta United. It was LAFC,
Yeah.
and Chelsea and other ones in their group, but it was empty, and there was no doubt about it. Right, there was early group stages, people kind of making fun, and there was an easy joke, that kind of thing. But as the tournament progressed, you get to the knockout stage, you see the bracket, you see potentially, all these teams like at the time, Manchester City's there, all the big hitters are there. But now, because of the way that the tournament was set up, you have a nice influx of South American teams, a couple of Saudi teams, and people were starting to get really excited. I can say, doing an interview with one of my colleagues at Golazo, Michael Lahoud, who our 24/7 um, fast channel that we have and network that we have, and he was also the same way. It was like, man, I wasn't sure about the tournament. Now I'm in because these guys are in, and as they play, they're going to get excited. And we saw it obviously with Chelsea and PSG at the end, that this really mattered to them to play. To your point, guys can get hurt. Jamal Musiala certainly suffered that horrific
Right.
injury, and obviously that's part of the game. I think that, luckily for FIFA and everybody involved on the top end, it couldn't have gone better for them. I think if they're trying to do something similar, the players would certainly try to push back. I don't know how much they'll be able to do that, and I certainly understand if they want to. But you got to admit, like again, whatever trepidation, questions you might have had, and they still may be valid at the end of the day. What ultimately played out was something over at MetLife with the semifinals and the finals ended up being pretty darn good. So it's tough. And then at the very end, again, like I said, with all the matches streaming on the zone, which is still kind of tough to find out here. You got to sign an account, get in there. It's a little
Yeah.
more known, obviously, abroad. And then they had, specialty matches on TNT, which or TBS or True TV, however they're deciding to put it out on Turner. But again, they got into it, and so it's all about the dollars. And I think the TV money can sometimes subsidize the ticket early stages, and then obviously towards the end they're able to kind of to fill it out. So.
Mhm. My guest tonight is Tommy Tran from CBS Sports. Stephen Nagishi with you, Ken Fang on vacation on the Double A Team podcast. I wanted to talk about the current state of media, and I know you touched about this a little bit ago. Regional sports network kind of gone belly up. FanDuel is kind of like taking over Bally Sports in some parts of the city, some parts of the country that used to carry Bally Sports. With the gambling, sports gambling, sports betting becoming so prevalent now in our society in this country, do you find it a little bit disturbing that maybe like FanDuel is carrying the sports networks that went belly up under Bally's ownership, or do you find that it's just the way it is in our society?
Yeah, it's tough. I think, I'm not trying to push back on FanDuel or DraftKings. They've obviously built themselves into the space. And look, it's
Right.
becoming, I think, it's becoming more mainstream. Gambling is now legalized in almost 40 states. And I think we're, 39 plus, I think, District of Columbia, with 10 or 11 states still yet to kind of cross that bridge. So, I think when you say, is it bad that FanDuel is running some of these regional networks? And I say, and I kind of harken back to not necessarily that I'm saying it's bad because that FanDuel is bad, right? It's because you get to a point where if you don't have resources at some of these regional networks, like a Sinclair, like a Bally's, like
Yeah.
at the time whoever's running it, you can only go, well, you can only again we talk about like middle class. Like when you get to the middle class, there's only so many other bigger buyers and bigger players that would be willing to either absorb you or be able to take you where you need to go. There's only so many players, just like there is, in local news with, only a handful of major players that run TV stations, Scripps, Tegna, Gannett, et cetera, that kind of thing. So obviously, news division on one side, but in sports, again, if cable subscriptions are down because people are streaming more, or those prices are going up because people are watching traditional channels except for sports and it keeps going up. I'm hoping, and I don't have the answer to this. I'm just hoping there's a way that there's some better ecosystem of having more players to help even the field so that we don't have to rely on someone like a FanDuel to come in and subsidize, not that they're subsidizing, but to sort of keep these regional networks afloat. And even, look, and I'm so far removed to SNY and yes, in our, Spectrum in LA, but those are obviously, you would
Yeah.
think, in the top two markets of the country. Again, I go back to you think top two markets in the country with like a combined 12 million people or whatever it is, and you think that they're going to be fine, and yet there's rumblings of like trying to sell this piece off and trying to do this piece and reconfigure what they're doing in the top two markets in the country. And for New York, obviously the sports fandom. I can admit being on the East Coast a little more is certainly there. I understand it now, and of course on the West Coast we're a little more laissez-faire. But
Sure.
to get back to your point, and again, I don't know the answer because I don't know who can get in and be financially viable. There's got to be hopefully a way, whether it's consolidating how we watch these sports or how these deals are put together,
Yeah.
to try to find a better way to make it easier for everyone involved while still being able to thrive so that no, people that are wanting to put these sports on the air aren't having to mark things up so much that so that people that are trying to enjoy it can't do so.
Mhm. There has been some massive changes being made at the Fox Sports. They fired a lot of their show hosts, Joy Taylor, Danny Parkins, Craig Carton, and then the former athletes themselves, Chase Daniel, LaShawn McCoy, Keyshawn Johnson, and then I'm trying to remember who else did they fire. Oh yeah, Emmanuel Acho. Who has been, somewhat of a lightning rod of controversy both on air as well as the on X as well. From an outsider's perspective, when you kind of like bring in former athletes onto a network to do a show or interact with these former athletes themselves, do you feel like some of these athletes themselves are well prepared for it, or do you feel like they're just I don't want to, downgrade, some of the athletes who have really stayed in the game for as long as they have in the media business, that these people haven't really gotten the training that is necessary to prepare themselves for life in media, because these changes at Fox Sports was kind of met with, it should have happened a long time ago, or, being somewhat of a, people applauding these moves, although it seems a little bit tad late for some. What are your thoughts on the, the athletes, former pro athletes getting into the media side of the business, and, whether they succeed or not?
That's that's a tough one you're asking me, because I don't really know anybody over at Fox Sports. I don't know how they operate. I don't know their day to day. I don't know what their process is. So it's very tough for me to, answer some of your questions about how prepared or how well trained their people are. I will say this. I think, and this is just gonna, again, I have no colleagues that I really know at Fox Sports. I don't know how
Sure.
they work and operate. This is just me, again, as I've given you with some of these other things, just my perception and my view of how I need to put some light here, by the way, of how some of these I know it's getting a little dark now. There we go. Just to get a little light. And so look, we can still, I think, agree, ESPN is still the biggest player around. They've got the most programming, they've got the most juice, they've got the biggest roster, and they've been that way for a long time, and deservedly so, obviously. So
Yeah.
I would always, without ever working for Fox Sports, and again, not knowing what they do, would commend them, because, and you're old enough to remember, and a lot of people are old enough to remember, they've gone through different machinations and evolved at a couple of shots to try to match ESPN and do their thing. So, whether that's FS1 and try to launch, a Sports Center type show,
Sure.
and these other sort of like morning program or talk show style or debate show style to go, um, you've gotta do something to try to compete, and you've got to try to do something to stay relevant. And
Right.
the people that they bring in is the people that they want to bring in. I can tell you generally that they've gone through some type of training, even if it's like someone you've never heard before,
Sure.
someone that is not as recognizable or noticeable. There are levels of training, obviously, depending on what league you go and that you come from. There's also boot camps and J school and some other things too, that when players decide that they're done with their careers, they want to transition into this type of business. Some of those things are certainly out there for them. And
Sure.
then obviously, and it just goes back to, again, trying to make a dent, trying to make a difference, trying to make a mark. And sometimes that goes with unknowns or people willing to say different things, do different things. And again, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I know I've heard some of the changes that they've had from afar, and it's unfortunate, but again, I think if there are other networks, whether it's NBC, us at CBS, Fox, ABC/ESPN, again, I think the more the better, the more competitive, the better. I hope that whatever decisions were made to do that doesn't stop them from trying maybe other avenues, and trying to create space, because obviously uh, the need for sports content is out there. It's just a matter of like how people consume it. It's like, is it going to be more digital? Is it more on socials and more on YouTube? Is it less on linear? Like those things are obviously things that networks and anyone trying to be in the space has to figure out. But um, yeah, I mean, it was tough to see some of those changes. And like I just said, I just hope that those other folks that didn't land on their feet and hopefully some other programming comes up to try to keep at it, because that would be great for a lot of us in the space.
Mm-hmm. A couple more segments with Tommy Tran from CBS Sports joining us on the Double A Team podcast tonight. Let's talk about the problems with the. Let me just see here. With the baseball gambling scandal involving Luis Ortiz, whose investigation apparently has been his suspension has been
Extended.
August 1st. We talked a little bit about the FanDuel, DraftKings, and their overtaking the sports, not the sports gambling, but also sports in general with the regional sports network and everything. How concerned are you about, certainly baseball has had historically, terrible problems with Black Sox, Pete Rose, among other things. But also we've heard stories about several basketball players, Terry Rozier and then Malik Beasley, being under investigations and everything. Are you concerned with the? I did say baseball, but also the sports having serious integrity problems. And is this kind of coincidental that the DraftKings and FanDuel and other Bet365s and other betting platforms have kind of becoming more and more accepted, that we're starting to see these types of problems?
So you have me on as a sports doctor. I'm fixing a lot of ailments here today.
Yeah,
But,
sorry about that, but
no, you're totally fine. It's interesting here, and I'm just listening to how you're framing everything. And I actually, because of my sports line background, I do a lot of the sports gambling stuff for CBS. I actually come from the other viewpoint, and I'm hearing you saying, is it a problem? And certainly gambling in general in excess, like anything else, is certainly a problem. But so you brought up a few things, whether it's Luis Ortiz. I'll bring up the Terry Rozier thing, right? So in general now, I think because sports betting is actually becoming a little more mainstream, there's more emphasis on bets and types of bets that are made. So if you actually look at the common thread of a lot of these things that happen, whether it is a Rozier order, and even the Alabama college baseball scandal that happened recently
Oh,
too,
yeah,
where
yeah,
they're
yeah.
making that bet. So what is the common thread in most, if not all, of those things, right? The common thread is that there were unusual bets made on typically minute to minor to marginal either player props or teams that found then high volume bets and raised flags. So I would then argue that then any type of insider information, impropriety, things of that nature, like the Rozier on that specific night of everyone betting him under and all his props, his points, his rebounds, and assists and whatnot, when someone's then all of a sudden, because how often is a Terry Rozier being bet versus a Giannis or a LeBron or Djokovic? So all of a sudden, these sports books that have regulatory practices and things in place catch these things, and all of a sudden they're saying, "Oh, here's someone trying to put their max bet allotment on a Terry Rozier prop on a random night during the week on a Tuesday or whatever day it was." But that instance, other instances, there's actually now these safeguards in place so that at any type of thing that comes up will actually then get squashed and quelled, and then it goes back, and then they can regulate some of these games better. Now, I will say, on the flip side, single game parlays, some of these other things that obviously tend to benefit the sports books, that's just always going to happen. Everything now always going to benefit the casino or the sports book more than you. That's just how it goes. Like, I remember a time when you got paid 2-1 on blackjack. Now it's 6-5, and even hitting blackjack is not what it used to be. And so that's going to happen at table games when you go to. So, do I personally think it's a problem? Obviously, from my answer, you can tell that it's not. I think that if anything, things are trending towards a way to make it easier to spot some of these irregularities and to spot these types of things. And I think that it would stop, I would think, in the future trying to be able to do, things like that. And I will say, and I'll end it with this too, it's not like they have no fault in terms of from a lot of my friends who are pro sports bettors, it's very tough to monetize because they're limited from these sports books all the time. They know that they have a good winning track record. It's all like poker guys. Sometimes they get banned from sports books or get limited at sports books. So even a sports better, a pro sports better that has good information, has an edge that they think they can take advantage of, they won't always be able to take advantage of that because the casino has limited their bet to however it is. So that's just the way things are now. That's just the way things go. But do I think it's a problem? I do not think it's a problem. I think if anything, more of this would actually end up being better for sports gambling, and I think for some of the sports leagues too.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the upcoming AAJA meetings, which you are heavily involved in it. AAJA, for those who are not familiar, Asian American Journalists Association, based out of Washington, D.C. Tommy has been one of the huge members and obviously a key member of this organization. Tommy, what is the agenda on this upcoming meetings? I believe this is in Seattle later this month, correct?
It's in Seattle at the end of the month, and I actually don't have a ton of information. I am a longtime member of AAJA, and over the last handful of years, there's also been a subgroup, and I call it an affinity group called the Sports Task Force. So there's tremendous people at the helm now. Michelle Steele, who recently called it a career at ESPN, is now the Sports Task Force president, and so her and her team are running fantastic panels and events and things to try to help out with that. Generally, AAJA is just a yearly gathering in different cities, depending on host sites, just like any other big event. And it's just a nice place to reconnect with some of those in the industry, to learn and meet new people, to talk about hot topics. Perhaps, one of the things that we talked about today would be a breakout panel and session. That's certainly out there. I can tell you, on behalf of CBS, I will be moderating one of those sports panels, which focuses heavily on women's pro sports, sort of the growth of the WNBA and NWSL. And so, that's something that we will have that Friday at the end of the month to talk about. But, just in general, it's great for Asian American representation. We know that obviously, whether it's on air or behind the scenes, there's always sort of trying to reflect your population, and Asian Americans in general sometimes have been perhaps overlooked a little bit, and certainly some markets are stronger than others. Traditional markets like a Seattle, San
Yeah.
Francisco, LA, Houston will in New York, and will generally Atlanta will generally have some stronger Asian American presence, but it doesn't mean that we're not out there everywhere. So that's just sort of if anyone that's unfamiliar with what AAJA or the Sports Task Force is, it's just a gathering together to connect, to reconnect, to learn, and then hopefully be able to make sure that we have a voice in the space, which we try to have with some of the other minority groups that are across the country that have similar events like ours.
Ken and I obviously started our own platform at a time when COVID 4 or 5 years ago hit, and our community was under attack. Literally, from racial perspective. From that time to where things are right now, what is the progress that's been made, and what is what needs to be done in order to give Asian Americans a more voice in the sports and entertainment industry moving forward?
Oh, don't know if I have an answer for that one for you, Chief.
Hmm.
I think
Right.
just from a representation perspective, I think it's important for
Hmm.
look. I think all anyone wants is a fair shot at doing a job
Yeah.
to do their job well. And look, I understand. I certainly understand getting out of a comfort zone. Again, I grew up in the Bay Area. There was a lot of Asian Americans. I grew up practically in a high school that was almost
Right.
all Asian, Filipino, Chinese, Japanese, Korean. I'm Vietnamese. So, and then for me to go to Yuma, Arizona, that was my first job, and I was probably one of five Asians in the entire city and region.
Yeah.
You learn that there are parts of the country that doesn't have as much Asian representation, and that's fine. It's a numbers thing, and obviously, our numbers are growing, but in the grand scale of things, they're still not as high as other places. I think what is tough, and I do have a news background, but I know that what's tough is sort of like, I think people who live in markets and cities that have diversity and that have relatively good amounts of Asian representation, then they learn to know that like some of these stereotypes that are certainly put out there or some scare tactics that put out there are not valid, and that so sometimes that makes it difficult, I think, in parts where they don't see a lot of Asians in their day-to-day interactions. And so whatever they may see on social media or on TV, and obviously specific sources of where they're getting their confirmation bias from, that can sort of accentuate sort of some of the, bad things that we've seen. So, I just think if there's chances, I always thought, and I know it's not easy, but if there's when some people are starting out in places that there's not a large comfortability of having your own, um, race represented, that's still an opportunity to teach and to grow. And that's certainly what
Right.
happened to me in
Just
Arizona, and I think those are some instances where we can probably do that in other parts of the country. So,
right. I want to end this on this the screen that I'm sharing. Obviously, Oakland A's are something that you're very familiar with from the Bay Area. Although I know you're more of a Giants fan per se, so I'm going to kind of end this A's efforts in relocating to the Vegas, and this was something that we talked earlier about how greed has kind of ruined the fans experience, and the fans being left behind, also being athletes themselves being their lives being kind of put to in danger. About your thoughts on the current situation with the Oakland Athletics, and for Asians to be more, I don't know, to be more accepted or have more presence in, the world of sports. Do you feel like, like what the Suga from BTS and also Chang Ho Park having more minority stakes? No pun intended there, of course, but in the athletics, do you feel like there should be more, Asians, hopefully getting more into the athletic ownership? Into this side, and how do you feel about the A's as downrotten as they are, with how they're being how they treated the fans in athletics, and relocating to Vegas for another new start there and everything.
okay. So I'm trying to figure which one to answer first here.
Okay, let's start with the A's one, because obviously
Okay.
you're from Bay Area.
Yeah. So the A's are always tough. It's funny because before the Giants won their three World Series titles in 10, 12, and 14, it was really the A's who have all the championships, right? It's always,
Exactly.
especially
Yes.
in the 70s and the 80s and early 90s. And then there was some real exciting teams with Mulder, Zito, Hudson teams. And,
Yeah, the Moneyball
obviously,
teams. Yeah.
the Moneyball teams were close and couldn't get over the hump, but they were certainly fun to watch. But so it's funny because my colleague David Sampson, who used to be president of the Marlins and was with us at CBS and still is with us actually at CBS. He just has his own show now.
Right.
Um,
Like
he
Pablo
he
Torres.
and right, and he's part of Meadowlark and Levitard group. We would always used to talk about really there are no big market, small market teams per se that you would think traditionally is geographically based. It's usually you're either like a big money club or a small money club. And, the A's unfortunately have kind of been a small money club. Now, part of that has had to do with limitations of what they were able to do. There's the famed argument of San Jose and the South Bay belonging to the Giants and territorial rights and things that, went against A's ownership and them trying to branch out and become a bigger brand. They just were unable to, then when Al Davis came in and also took the Coliseum, and it was a beautiful ballpark kind of before the renovation. And then because of the football stuff, they had to create that multi-use one, which then made the foul territory at the Coliseum legendary and not in a good way. So from an A's fan, they've had to deal with also losing the Raiders, and then the Warriors go across to San Francisco. So just Oakland and the East Bay in general has just been really hard hit with a lot of different things and a lot of their teams. And their owner wants to try and get the stadium, and they tried at the terminal site in the Bay Area, didn't work, and now they want to try to get to Vegas. Although we'll see if that stadium deal is still going through, how much money and how much he's been able to secure. I think he's put up his earthquake stake in Major League Soccer to
Right.
perhaps raise some money for that too. So, and Vegas is no longer, be different if they were the first pro team in, but now, the Raiders have gotten in town. Everyone loves the Golden Knights. It's like there's only so much real estate you can get. And I fear that if they if they still try to get to Vegas, and even if they get to Vegas, like I don't know how many locals would want them. And it's different than they've really embraced the Golden Knights, the Aces to a certain extent in the W, and obviously the Raiders is good, but fans can always fly to certain dates, and that kind of takes care of itself, but that's just the difference of that particular franchise. And to your second point about like ownership, like should we get more Asian American representation in ownership or front offices? Like of course, like I would think that that would be the goal, but it's like, again, as we've now talked about for about an hour now, like sports is costly, it's not cheap. And even though franchise evaluations certainly are ballooning, and you want a piece of a team if you can, no matter what. And even if you get into MLS or USL or NWSL or WNBA, these evaluations again are just evaluations, but the thought is that you want to be able to, increase your portfolio to buy teams. And certainly, Chan-Ho Park and Suga, and that would be nice to have them be a part. They would be certainly bring more eyeballs and more notoriety within maybe the common fan or non-sports fan to then go and root for a team. But we're seeing players like Alex Rodriguez with the Timberwolves, and
Yeah.
other minorities, and Latinos, and obviously African Americans, and even the Kings with Vivek. So we have some of that out there. How that reflects obviously in society, that I think sports would be nice to see. I don't know if it's paramount that we need to exactly have maybe more than we should, or less than we should. I just think that the thing in general too with the whole sports thing is like we're really not going to have too many more single person or single family owned
Yeah.
franchises anymore. I mean, the Bus family, obviously they did the doc on
Yes.
HBO, but just the
Thank
Bus
you.
family now, they're all conglomerates now, right? They're all these
Right.
consortiums and conglomerates, because no one person or even one sort of business or corporation has all that money. You have to pull all this money now to buy certainly any of the top four pro franchises, obviously. And then there's now again
Sure.
the WNBA is expanding 4 or 5 teams over the next 5 years. Major League
Right.
Soccer, that kind of thing. So I
And
would love to
private
see it.
equity is also trying to jump
Yeah,
into
right.
sports.
Mhm.
I saw somewhere about they're targeting youth sports, which sends shiver down my spine.
Right.
Considering how ruthless private equities are, and youth sports is like the last bastion of kids from all backgrounds. Girls, boys. Whether you're rich or poor, they can actually participate, and I really do worry about the state of sports in this country, when things like this, starts to get involved,
Oh, I mean, even if they don't get in, it's kind of already been built that way. Soccer people will tell
Pay to
you
play
that,
is a big problem.
correct, pay to play. I see a little bit less here in Florida, but certainly in California, these 3-4 hour road trips to Bakersfield or to even to LA, or just to play in these like club tournaments where they're in volleyball or soccer or baseball. It's like these to your point, these pay to plays makes it very difficult for access for people, which is why soccer still generally remains one of the more popular ones, because you can kind of just play in the street, you can play at lower levels, you can
Right.
succeed. You don't have to. Now, eventually you get to an academy, and in some instances you forego the sort of standard school system. But no, I'm with you there. I think it's tough. Like I said, I got a 10-month-old, and I'm not even close to T-ball and some of the other ancillary things yet. But I do dread that a little bit of like, do I need to specialize him now? Because when I was growing up, I could play 2, 3, 4 club sports and not have to really worry about it.
Absolutely. Well, Tommy, thank you really for joining us tonight on this Monday. And I know you're probably, going to be traveling to Seattle for the AAJA annual conference very, very soon. And, I appreciate your time and sharing your perspective from, working in the sports industry as well. And, Ken and I would love to have you back on again later this year, if possible, to talk more about the state of the industry. And then hopefully, we can maybe get back into becoming a member of AAJA, and then also to be actively get ourselves into maybe interviewing more insiders, or at least those who work in the industry, because obviously we've kind of gotten away from, our original goal of wanting to interview more Asian people to promote them and, promote diversity, especially, which is important more so in this day and age in a, politicized world that we live in. But, we'd love to, reach out to you for more support and help moving forward. And enjoy the rest of your summer, Tommy, and look forward to having you on again, and have a great time in Seattle. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
I appreciate you, and you guys are doing some fantastic work. So thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much, and we look forward to doing this again. And thanks for those joining us tonight. And we hope to do this again Wednesday. Don't forget 10/7 Pacific time. It is with James Deco from a fantasy football expert. We'll talk about the upcoming season and so forth. So thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next time on the Double A Team podcast.